So we move to Ostia. And Ostia is the harbor city for Rome because the city of Rome is some 13 to 15 miles from the Mediterranean. And Ostia is where we find a great deal of Roman apartments. And this is a model of one of those apartments really from the exterior. These would be multi-story up to 5 stories. So imagine a 5th floor Roman walk-up. And it was very expensive to live in the city. Only the very wealthiest would have houses like we see on the right. So most people will live in tenements or in basically apartment blocks. After 64 CE and the fire that runs through Rome, in part thanks to Nero, there's a new fire code that these buildings must be brick or concrete, just like if you've ever lived in a dormitory on a campus. Most of those are built the same way. The ground floor, just like the houses, were shops. When you get into the apartments themselves, they were nothing more than basically living space and bedrooms, and you would have a lot of people in them, whole families in these apartments. And by families, I mean parents, children, grandparents. 3 to 4 generations is not uncommon. All cooking was done in the hallway. So there were common kitchens on each floor that were used. So you could imagine the chaos that would happen from time to time. And the bathrooms were situated on different floors. So frequently maybe the 1st, 3rd, and 5th floor, or the 2nd and 4th floor are the only ones with bathrooms. Although it should be pointed out that there's no such thing as privacy in Roman bathrooms. We don't have men's rooms and women's rooms. Everyone really uses the same place. And that sounds very odd for us today, but it makes perfect sense because when you think of the toga, even the short toga that only comes to around the knees or a little lower, that would have covered you more than enough to use a restroom. And you would have a room with a bench with holes cut in it, maybe as many as 20 of them. And people would have conversations for 2 hours in the bathroom with other people. It was a social event for the Romans. Now, these weren't great places to live necessarily, but it was a place that you could live. And it was available to the majority of people in the Roman Empire. Now, it should also be pointed out that oftentimes they didn't spend a lot of time in the apartment. They were often out on the streets entertaining themselves in other ways. Now we have the equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius. And Marcus Aurelius is a very famous emperor. He's Hadrian's adopted son. And he's known for a book that he wrote called Meditations. He's a great Stoic. And we see that even in the artwork, including the equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius. Now, it should be pointed out, the only reason we have this equestrian statue is it was mistaken for Constantine. So for a long time, the Christians identified this as Constantine, so didn't melt it down for another statue. And here we see the full-size statue. And one of the things that should stand out at you almost immediately is the fact that this is either an enormously large man or a very small horse. Or both. Not really sure. So the reason he is so much larger than the horse is to make sure that he is the focus of attention. As we look at the statue, you'll also notice this gesture. And this is our famous gesture of oration. When you look at the face, you'll notice it's not the optimistic face that we see elsewhere. This is a sense of realism, really a sense of sort of foreboding. It goes beyond verism. We see Marcus Aurelius as being sad and weary. This is trying to give a sense of the real character and personality of Marcus Aurelius. And things are rough for him. He's the last of what are kind of considered the 5 good emperors. His son Commodius will be killed by his wrestling coach, but not in gladiatorial combat at the hands of Russell Crowe. And he's really sort of seeing the empire declining. He sees it as emperor, but that doesn't mean all the people see it yet. But it's definitely on the decline at this point. And by the way, the tradition of the equestrian statue is one that comes down to us from the Romans. It'll pass through Charlemagne, through the Renaissance and elsewhere, this idea of a man on a horse or a general on a horse. And when you see it in the ancient world, the feet don't mean anything. Whereas when you see it at Gettysburg or various places in the United States, one leg raised, one of the horse's legs raised usually means an injury at the battle. Both legs raised usually means death, that the person riding the horse died at that battle. But that code does not apply in the ancient world.